Hello, good morning everybody. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today. So as part of our What's Stopping You campaign series, today we're going to be looking at reaching the inbox. And this actually can often be a hidden struggle. And what I mean by this is that you might spend all your time, putting together an amazing campaign, really well-crafted promotions, you might be using personalized content, but perhaps, your campaigns aren't doing as well as you thought. Maybe because did you know that on average, 1 out of 6 emails doesn't actually reach your subscribers' inboxes. And so this can have a big impact on your campaign performance and obviously ultimately your revenue. So as marketers, many of us look at our sent and our delivered numbers, but then really how many of your delivered actually reaches the inbox and not the junk folder. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. What is stopping you from reaching the inbox, and obviously the ways that we can obviously help you improve your chances as well. So I'm Rachel Cotardia, the Marketing Director at RedEye. And for those of you that don't know who RedEye is, we are a multi-channel marketing automation platform. So as well as our amazing platform, part of the support that we provide clients who use the platform is deliverability advice. And I know we've always gone beyond for this, having a dedicated team internally, as we see it as such an important area for marketers where you will need that help and guidance. But we do this in collaboration with our sender certification partner, Validity. So I'm delighted to have Guy join me today, as he is the ideal person to talk through sort of inbox placement and most importantly, some of the solutions to overcome that as well. So Guy, would you like to do a quick introduction?
Sure, thank you, Rachel. It's so great to be here today. I'll keep this very brief. I've been working in the world of email marketing for over 20 years now, and I've definitely got the grey hairs to prove it. Outside of my day job, I've had a long time involvement with the Data and Marketing Association, the DMA, and I'm currently the vice chair of the email council there. We produce quite a lot of the annual research that comes out of that organization. In terms of Validity, the top level is that we're the global leader of email deliverability and intelligence solutions around the world. And I think if at any time over the past years you've come across the likes of ReturnPath, 250OK, Bright Verify, MailCharts, they are all now part of the Validity family and providing the expertise and the insights to get emails delivered and opened. And we're also a long-term RedEye partner, and really, really pleased to have this opportunity to have this conversation today.
Yeah, glad to have you with me. And so obviously we'd like to have this quite conversational, can't we? But we do obviously have some slides to share with you all, because some of the things we'll be discussing, hopefully, if you can just see them, it might sort of bring to life what we're sort of chatting about today. But the final thing as well, before then we get into some of the content, is we are happy to answer any questions. So if you do have anything, feel free to submit it over to us, and I will occasionally check in and we can see about answering those as and when they do come through. So I think the best place to start actually is with some definitions. So we've got 2 really big key terms here, deliverability and inbox placement, but we know they're different things. But Guy, maybe let's start with explaining that the difference in these terms, and then ultimately why they are both equally important as well.
It's a really great question, and we often have to differentiate between the two. So the former is effectively the accepted rate, the sent minus bounced rate, and this is the deliverability metric that most sending platforms currently report on. And that's great, but the one thing it doesn't consider is what happens next. Where were those emails placed? Did they go to subscribers' inboxes, where they're going to see them and engage with them and hopefully buy the products and services that are being promoted? Or do they end up in the recipient's spam or junk folders, or even get blocked or rejected, where these outcomes are far less likely? So when we talk about inbox placement rate, we are talking about the percentage of emails sent that actually deliver to the inbox. And the global average is around 85%. And so that's a significant opportunity cost, because as you said, the balance, those 1 in 6 emails that don't end up in the inbox, they cost, the cost is around about 7.5p in terms of average revenue per email that isn't being generated. And when it comes to who's responsible for what, so, the former is the responsibility of the deliverability team. So things like email authentication, sending infrastructure, list hygiene, good bounce management practices, they all form part of that remit. The latter is more in the hands of the senders and practices like how many emails per week they're sending and the content that they're using and the offers they're presenting. And then the way that their subscribers respond to those emails. So positively in terms of opens and clicks, or negatively in terms of complaints and deletes. And this is the piece of the equation that Validity influences. We've got global relationships with multiple mailbox providers around the world. And this is why we're partners, because with RedEye and Validity working together, senders benefit by having all of these bases covered.
Yeah, exactly. We cover both angles nicely, let's say. But so yeah, the marketers then listening in, the ways that they can sort of impact these key terms then, as you were sort of saying, is, firstly, list hygiene for that deliverability. So, really ensuring that you've got good data cleansing practices. You're thinking about using engagement data to drive segments. You don't want to have anyone that's not right in that segment before you hit send. And then inbox placement then, is that right message to the right person, because as you were saying, the more emails that you send with no engagement, the worse it's then going to impact your placement sort of overall. And so those figures that you just shared there, when we were chatting about it as well, before we did this webinar, I was really surprised at those sort of average inbox placement rates. So I think what would be quite good is to actually go through a practical example with people here, in terms of the numbers, and actually get some sort of physical sort of numbers and revenue that they could kind of understand the impact that this can have. So let's say, for example, you've got 1 million in your sort of, and so you might think, okay, well, my campaign then is going to 1 million people, but actually there's quite a few factors that sort of reduce that down before you're even giving the customer the opportunity to engage with the campaign or not. So let's say, so 1 million in your segment, there may be about 98% delivery. Sometimes it's 98 to 99, which is quite good. But let's say in this example, there's a 2% bounce rate, which is your old and inactive data. So that means actually there's only 980,000 that's sort of gone. But a marketer then can't think, okay, well, 980,000 customers have then got my email, because what we're saying here is that on average in the UK it's about 83% inbox placement. So that means in this example, about 166,000 emails are potentially in the junk folder. Right? So that means they're most likely never seen by your customers. That's quite a sizable amount, which can obviously lead to lost revenue, as you were saying. So I think then on this slide now, then you're going to kind of show actually maybe just a little small improvement in inbox placement has those big uplifts in revenue, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and I think we actually ended up developing this revenue dashboard at Validity, because what we found was that although our day-to-day contacts, the email marketing managers, absolutely understand this conversation, it's more difficult for other stakeholders in their organizations, the CFO, the procurement person, maybe the legal team, to quickly get the benefit of what we're talking about. So we created this visualization, and what we've got here is effectively the numbers which you just shared in your illustration. We've plugged in some UK benchmarks in terms of average open rate, average click rate, and looking at the scenario on the left, making the point that even this relatively modest program sending 1 million emails a month, if it could improve its inbox placement rates just by 1%, from that 83% to 84%, they're going to generate almost another £1,000 a month in terms of revenue from their program, over £10,000 a year. And that's about the bare minimum that you could achieve. I think the middle example, where we say, what if you can move the needle up to 90% inbox placement, which is what we start to associate with best-in-class senders, that annual uplift is now £75,000. And if you can dial it up all the way to around about 98%, which is what we regularly see from our sender certified customers, which we'll be talking about in just a moment, that annual revenue uplift, again, for this relatively modest program, is another £160,000 a year. in attributable revenue, which feels like quite a compelling story. What's not to like?
Exactly. And I suppose then, before we go into the reasons as to maybe why somebody might have a certain inbox placement rate at the moment, I think, there are some then what you call reputational metrics as well, and other things to monitor around inbox placement.
Yeah, so I think, the flip side of the inbox placement coin is spam placement and missing rates. And, these are the numbers that you need to monitor, to determine the portion of your email sends that aren't achieving inbox placement. And then it's absolutely critical to monitor your sender reputation metrics as well, and the underlying factors that influence them. Now, we often liken sender reputation to a credit score for email marketers. And like a credit score, you want that number to be as good as possible because it informs how mailbox providers see email senders. And there's many different factors that influence a sender score, and we've got them all listed on this slide. Possibly one of the most important ones is spam complaint rates, because our spam complaint, when your recipient hits that "this is spam" or "mark as junk" button, that sends out a really strong negative signal about the quality of the emails that's generating those complaints. So we're not going to spend a lot of time discussing all these factors today, but you can absolutely learn more by visiting the SenderScore website. You've got the link at the bottom of the slide there at senderscore.org.
Yeah. So then I suppose now, if we then look at the reasons why marketers struggle to get into the inbox, that was the title of the webinar, what's stopping you reaching the inbox. And normally there is content around sort of deliverability. It's heightened around now. We've got Black Friday approaching, and I suppose that's normally when sort of inbox placement can become more apparent. But actually, we know it's a challenge all year round, isn't it? So what would you then say, in your experience, some of the reasons as to why marketers are struggling to get their emails to reach the customer's inbox?
I think the biggest single factor is that there's been a massive increase in global email marketing volumes, and they pretty much doubled if you're comparing the numbers pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic, and a lot of that happened in a very short period of time, particularly as we all went into the lockdown period, and many traditionally offline businesses were suddenly forced online in order to survive. And I remember we compared the numbers at the time, and literally from March to April, email volumes went up by about 60%, almost overnight. And this has placed a lot of stress on mailbox providers to handle and process all of this additional volume. I think at first we wondered whether it was just a temporary spike, but it's actually become the new normal. And what it means is that there's also far greater competition for iShare and share of wallet, for that matter, in more congested inboxes. So that acts as a dampener on overall subscriber engagement, and that's another key influencer of good deliverability. And then more recently, I guess it goes without saying that the current economic climate also isn't helping. I think consumers have definitely reined in disposable spending, at the same time that marketers are under increasing pressure to mail deeper into their lists on a more frequent basis. Their CMOs are coming to them saying, "Hey, we've got this million inactive email addresses, let's use them." And to hell with the best practices and to hell with the consequences. And that's absolutely contributing to the deliverability challenge at the moment.
Yeah, and just that, I know I've talked about this before, it's a marketing myth that the more emails that you send, the better results. That just isn't necessarily true. So just, commenting on that last part, if you are under pressure to hit the targets and you are encouraged to send more, up your frequency, up your volumes, but if that isn't the right message to the right segment, that's what we're saying, it's going to hinder your inbox placement for your highly engaged customers. Right? And those are the ones where you need that high inbox placement and good inbox placement, should I say, because those highly engaged ones are your VIPs, your top spenders, your frequent spenders, your brand advocates, those messages need to go through. So, if you were then under pressure to sort of mail deeper and send more, I would also suggest that automations should be looked at here. So what do you have live? What can you add, enhance, or change in your automation strategy? Because we know some of our clients can make over 60% of their email revenue with automation, and automations have smaller send volumes than your BAU campaigns. But that sort of percentage of revenue is because they are relevant to the customer in that moment, or from their behavior of what they've done, or their stage in the life cycle. So they are more likely to engage and obviously hopefully convert. And obviously that's then going to have better benefits, isn't it, for the wider deliverability and sort of inbox placement, what we're talking about here. Yeah. So I suppose they are the foundations, so to speak, that we talk about here, and advising, clients and prospects, good sending practices, as I've just said, utilize automation, maximize personalization, but they all could do with a little helping hand. And that's, I suppose, then where sender certification comes in, isn't it? So would you like to sort of tell people, what do we mean by sender certification?
So an analogy that we often use when we describe it is that it's a little bit like having a VIP ticket to a big event. And what it means is that you've been pre-accredited, the organizers know exactly who you are, and as a result, you go straight to the front of the queue and you're first into the building. And sender certification is a little bit like that. What it is a global email accreditation program, and how it operates is that Validity audits candidate programs against a broad range of legal requirements and industry standards and best practices. And if they pass and they become sender certified accredited, what they then have is trusted sender status with over 80 global mailbox providers, filtering companies, hosting providers, anti-spam vendors, etc. And what this means is that trusted status overcomes the risk of false positive spam filter decisions that might otherwise result in legitimate emails being placed in the spam or junk folder. With sender certified, in almost all instances, they go straight to the inbox.
Yeah, we all love a VIP pass, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
But just to comment on that term that you use then in terms of trusted sender. So, as a customer, myself, I recognize that I've seen that sometimes, in my personal Hotmail inbox, from, emails from retailers or whatever. There's sometimes a little link, add this sender to your trusted senders list. So how does that work, either with or against sort of more broader sender certification, what you're talking about here?
I think it's a really great comparison, because what you're describing effectively sets up a one-to-one accreditation between you, the subscriber, and the program that's sending that email to you. And you're saying, I trust them, I know them, I want to receive those emails. Now, the challenge for pretty much any email program is that even the ones that have that request acted on really successfully probably get to a stage over a period of time where maybe 5% or 10% of their subscribers have responded positively to that request and actually added them to their trusted senders list or their allow list. Effectively, what certification does is it helps email programs to achieve that at scale by effectively sort of recreating that trusted sender relationship with all of the recipients, not just a handful of them.
Yeah, so that's the one-to-one, the trusted sender in your inbox is your one-to-one certification, whereas we're talking about here a bit more of a wider scale, as you say.
Correct.
Okay, so then I suppose, right, let's then drill down, I suppose, into the benefits that the marketer then can kind of specifically see for sender certification.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think it goes without saying that the biggest single benefit is better inbox placement rates. And we published some research a little bit earlier this year that showed that on average, a certified email program enjoys inbox placement rates that are 11.3% higher than comparable non-certified programs. And actually, this number is growing. I've just done some fresh analysis and research, and that number is probably closer to 15% right now in terms of the favoring certified senders. And as you'll know, Rachel, we've already got plenty of mutual customers who enjoy this advantage. But it's not just about improved throughput, improved deliverability. There's benefits in terms of improved throughput, faster delivery of those emails with less throttling restrictions. Senders get access to exclusive data directly from the participating mailbox providers. So Microsoft and Yahoo are giving you daily data telling you exactly what they did with the emails that they saw from you that day. And there's 24/7 support to the program, which means that you've got extra eyes on your program watching out for any potential threats that you might be facing. There's some specific use cases around special periods where senders may need to dramatically increase volumes at short notice, for example, or deal with unexpected reputational challenges, or even just dealing with the complexities of running a program that goes to international markets. And we'll talk about a few of these in a moment. But at the end of the day, many sender certified customers also simply talk about the peace of mind factor. The idea that they aren't spending a large part of their working day worrying and troubleshooting deliverability problems, and they can use that time more productively. And that's just relief with a capital R, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so nearer 15% you were saying now, higher, placement, that's just potential email revenue just sitting there, isn't it, really, for someone to kind of get hold of. But yeah, the last one that you've just sort of said, peace of mind, I think that is a really, really sort of big one for me, because you can take on the deliverability advice. You can be doing good segmentation, you can have good personalized content, you can be doing all, you're maximizing automation. But a way to think about it is sometimes there are factors outside of your control that can then impact it. So that's then when sender certification can be, as you say, that peace of mind, that it's sort of helping out in the background, because, for example, everyone are ramping up volumes as we've, discussed with sort of peaks. So customers' inboxes are crowded and they can be, easily distracted and more, less engaged with you than they normally are. But everybody upping their volumes is kind of outside of your control, So if you do have that VIP pass, as we've called it, or that helping hand, then yeah, surely that is a weight off the marketer's shoulders, and then they can concentrate, as you say, on the next big campaign or wherever they need to sort of redirect their time and effort, really.
Absolutely.
And then so you did sort of touch on use cases a little bit there, but I suppose, another use case where this could be a benefit is moving marketing platforms. We know a key concern that marketers have when changing platforms is that potential for customer impact. And at RedEye, we see that warming up of new IP addresses is an extremely important step when we take on new clients. So as I mentioned, earlier, we have sort of dedicated deliverability experts, and they have it as their sole goal to make that process as seamless as they can for new clients, dedicated plans, but also, that support to talk through, what needs to happen, when, why, really helping that sort of marketer understand the importance. So that's, I suppose, the side, let's say, like RedEye can offer to start the process in a good direction. But then sender certification in this use case can then be that extra layer on top, so to speak, can't it, to make that migration even more seamless?
That's absolutely right. And I think, the way I think about this is that ESP migrations probably pose one of the biggest risks to an email program for their senders. And if you get them wrong, revenues can plummet, and the reputational damage that you can create for your program can actually be permanent. It's not just short term. And the reason for this is, we sometimes say that the one thing that's worse than having a bad sender reputation is having no reputation at all. And especially during a migration, this can have a really negative impact on campaign performance, because those new IP addresses that you're starting to use to send your emails don't initially have a reputation. And that's why senders will put in place ramp up plans to try and build up that reputation in a managed fashion. And without that reputation, there is a real risk for senders of burning their new IP addresses. And where sender certification comes into play is by helping senders achieve a trouble-free volume ramp up by effectively preserving their existing reputation that they've worked so hard to achieve. And so what this means is that they're immediately recognized as good actors when they start sending off their new platform. And that substantially reduces the migration risk. It means programs can quickly scale up to full capacity without impacting deliverability and revenue. And RedEye's experts absolutely know this. They do a great job managing these migrations, and sender certification just provides them with an extra tool in their toolbox to make sure that the process is as smooth and pain-free as possible.
And scaling up that, scaling up is so important. We understand that clients need to see time to value even quicker with their tech investments. And so, obviously, as I said, we can help strive for that, getting them up and running with great personalized automations as quick as possible. But then, as you say, this is then another tool really to help them get that time to value even more quicker, isn't it?
Definitely.
So, we can't, do a webinar in October and potentially not talk about the biggest retail season that's fast approaching, sort of, Black Friday. And we know that inbox placement then can be one of the biggest challenges that, a lot of retailers have around Black Friday. As we've already discussed and you already know, so much competition is hitting that inbox. There's rapid surges of volumes. And so, this is where then those mailbox providers are starting to get quite a bit more picky on what they let pass and they don't. But as with this slide is kind of showing, but as soon as peak's done, then there's Christmas, then there's the New Year, January sales, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, the list kind of goes on. Those key retail dates just keep coming and coming, don't they? So I think obviously this final part then, what you wanted to sort of talk through, Guy, is actually making sure that marketers think about good sending practices and tools like sender certification to really form part of your Black Friday, your peak campaign strategy, because actually it can have a bit more of a lasting impact beyond that, can't it?
Absolutely. And, I think when we talk about the impact of bad deliverability, you're absolutely right. It's not just about Black Friday and Cyber Monday. It lasts right throughout the peak period to mid-January, and then it's Blue Monday, and then it's Valentine's Day, and it's pretty relentless. And what we've been doing recently, and what you're seeing on this graph, is some analysis that shows that the dip increases that gap between your certified and non-certified senders by around another 5%. Post Black Friday, and it's not just a temporary dip. It lasts for a good 8 weeks before that additional lost inbox placement starts to come back. So in terms of lost revenue, this is actually far more impactful than the sort of short-term V-shaped dip that we used to see around this period. And those tactics that generate negative subscriber behaviors over the Black Friday period now have much longer term consequences. And final comment, also note how the top line, the certified senders, actually increases during the same period. And I think what's going on here is that mailbox providers have to make decisions about the increased email traffic that they're processing. And we can clearly see from this graph how they prioritize and reward the trusted senders during this period.
Yeah, lasting impact is what you don't want when you're, retail seasons just keep coming and coming and coming, isn't it? But obviously, this sounds great and peak's only just around the corner though, but actually, is it even possible to think about getting something like this in place before peak?
So the good news is it's not too late to apply, but you do need to move quickly. And if you in the audience are already a RedEye customer, have a word with your account manager to get the conversation started. If you're not yet working with us, reach out directly. You can speak to us at validity.com or even ping me on LinkedIn. And there's also a short form on our website that you can complete to see if your email program's eligible for our pre-approval process, which will make the application process even shorter, which just feels like a great result.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much, Guy, for joining me on this conversation today around sort of inbox placement. I hope everybody that sort of listened in has sort of learned a few things, and I know we're just about running out of time, so I'll really quickly wrap through hopefully a few takeaways that everyone has got from listening in. So, firstly, you can't assume that, you know, all of your, you know, non-opened emails are just actually being ignored by customers. So, you know, what we've just said, they might not even have been seen by them. They might be in the junk folder. And the reasons that some of, you know, this happens is bigger volumes, bad segmentation, you know, irrelevant messaging, you know, all of that is then going to lead to poor customer engagement. So, you know, the more emails that you send that are not being opened or engaged with, then the more chances that you have for even more emails to go into that junk folder. And so, you know, one of the ways, you know, automations can help improve this. If you're sending that right message to the right time, to the right person, that's going to help, you know, improve your inbox placement for your BAUs. And as we talked about earlier, making sure those messages go through to your top loyal customers as well. But on top of those good sending practices, if you want that VIP pass, then obviously that's where sender certification can come in. But finally, so if you are thinking about sort of changing marketing platforms, then, you know, really look for the ones that take deliverability and inbox placement seriously, you know, and not just sort of give you the platform and away with it that you are. You know, RedEye, as I've said, you know, we're passionate about this. And we have deliverability experts on hand to really, you know, help with all the good advice on sending practices. But our partners here at Validity can also be part of that process as well to make things quicker and, you know, improve that time to value that I've just said. So, a couple of minutes over, so apologies everyone on that, but hopefully you've got a lot of good content from here. We haven't had any questions come through, but I don't want to sort of take up too much of your time. So if you do have anything post this webinar, then obviously you can feel free to reach out to either myself or Guy sort of directly. But that is it from us today. But thank you, Guy, for joining.
This has been such a good conversation. Thanks so much for the invite, and really glad we got it together.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.